But my biggest advice to them is that regardless, you're going to think you learn all this stuff and then you're going to go branch out on your own. And then reality is going to hit you like a steel ton of bricks. Okay, you went to a great school. Nobody gives a shit. Okay, you were super smart. You were super effective at Tennr. Nobody gives a shit. It's like they only want to care about their problem. Oh, and the problem doesn't make the money. Once again, nobody gives a shit. And you're going to have to get like completely re-humbled again because, we've probably gotten lucky in more ways than I can even count.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Something New, the podcast where we talk about interesting things going on in tech for people building something new. Or at least people aspiring to build something new. I'm Leeor.
And I'm Steph.
Think of us as a bit of a technical how I built this, but maybe a little bit less Guy Raz and a little bit more Guy Riz.
This is the peak, and then we're going downhill from here.
I'm using my podcast voice.
What I thought was really funny is like seeing all of the drama online between companies. First it was Brex and Ramp. Now this week it's Deal versus Rippling. I also saw like a fun jab between Ladder, which is like an up and coming, I think Austin or at least Texas based fitness company, and Peloton. And maybe the originals also of like Wendy's versus Burger King versus McDonald's social media. And I think it's so fun. I think more companies should start feuds, and I love it. I'm here for it.
Look, I think it's important, I think it's important to have it can be really helpful and important to have an enemy, sensibly. Like it can be fun. Like, again, you don't want the ill will to happen to the other person, but having someone to like align your company, be like, hey, we're trying to beat these people, like has been helpful since the dawn of mankind. And so I think it's fun. And I think like, as long as it's done like in good spirit, I think like I'm all for it. And it kind of I don't know. It makes it more and more interesting.
Yeah. It just seems like fun entertainment, kind of similar to like when Mark Cuban and Elon Musk were fighting, where like, they're both billionaires. They're both doing great. They're just jabbing insults to each other online. As a regular consumer of, whatever, who's like completely detached from all of this and literally has zero relevance to any of these companies, I just think it's like funny for entertainment where no one really gets hurt. And I am here for it. I love it.
Yeah,
it's like the petty corporate drama and startup drama that we need,
I completely agree. I had one more, if in case you want to go over that one. But,
go for it.
Okay, this is from the head of social from Away. I'll read like kind of the relevant things. Her name is Alice Chen, talking about how they think about their social strategy. They went viral recently because they kind of leaned in this whole like lookalike trend.
Brilliant.
So brilliant. And so she says, cultural relevance is our North Star, and we prioritize adaptability to get there. The way consumers experience content on social media today in such a nonlinear way gives us freedom to make social our creative playground. The flip side of that means that platforms want new. So we've built internal infrastructure that empowers us to move quickly, react to the cultural climate, and create with intention without taking ourselves too seriously. The other thing she mentions, the main question they always ask themselves is this ownable to Away? Our biggest wins have been a result of bias to action paired with an ownable approach. Ownability is key. Moving quickly only gets you part of the way. One of the reasons I love like her like kind of describing like how to create good viral content.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've had a couple of conversations with some great folks over the course of like our 35 episodes. Including I remember Alan Maman being one in particular that stands out on this dimension. And like social and anything along those lines is like seems like so like fluffy to some extent. Like if you're not like someone who's in that game, and to hear someone kind of like break it down into its component parts, which for them is like speed and ownability.
What does ownability mean in practice?
So I think it means in this context is like, can we look, if there's a random trend that's happening, like and it doesn't really, you can't really like relate it naturally to Away, then they're not going to do it. They're not going to like lean into a trend that it's like too hard. It's like square peg round holding a trend. But if there's a trend like the lookalike thing, so the example of what they did here is they have like these like two, I guess, celebrities who like I guess, look like each other. And they both had them with like away bags, and it's been like a whole like dialogue on social media about like lookalikes. Partiful has all these like lookalikes, across the country where people are like coming to see who looks most like Glenn Powell, or, who looks most like Timothy Chalamet. And so they realized they could, from an ownability perspective, like lean into that trend. And then they built an infrastructure to do it quickly as well. And so it's just cool and interesting to see like a company like kind of break down, again, to my earlier point, of like into component parts, and then like kind of like science the art of virality.
Is the infrastructure they built in, do you mean that like software that helps them scrape the top trends and seeing that? Or do you mean more like a nimble team that's, well positioned to move quickly, or both?
I think from what I understand, it's a little bit of both. And so it's like they are aware of like what are the trends of the day. And then they also have like a nimble team who understands like, okay, if we see a trend that's out there, like how do we like, is there a way to kind of get incorporated with it? And B, is it something that we can do quickly as well? And so it just I don't know. I thought it was just a cool way of talking about virality, because like, again, to me, as someone who's like that, my brain doesn't work in that way as much. Like, hearing someone talk about it as like what works for their brand, is fascinating.
Yeah, no, I do think it's really cool. I mean, I think we're moving more into a world where, this is not a unique thought, where like distribution is becoming increasingly more important,
Yeah,
whether
totally.
it's behind a specific creator or, obviously just like, what's the word? Like sourcing, e-commerce objects or whatever seems to be more and more of a commodity. Like there's just less, innovation happening, especially when it comes to like products or CPG goods, et cetera. And so really a differentiator, we've seen this even with like, Mr. Beast and the stuff that he's launched, or, a lot of other big CPG products. Like Alex Cooper just launched like a hydration drink this week. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, they say that it's science backed or, whatever. Do I believe that that's really the innovation? Like probably not. Like it really comes down to like the branding, distribution, creator, endorsement, things like that. And I think this is just another version of that where whatever, you can say whatever you want about their suitcases. I think they're great. But I think more than that, they've created themselves as like a status symbol and, to your point, like a brand known for cultural relevance. And, that obviously benefits them in lots of different ways too, in lieu of a trillion other suitcase companies just hanging out there. So I do think that's very cool.
Yeah. I mean, curious actually from like your perspective, like even with Penn, like how do you guys think about like engaging with like the zeitgeist versus like kind of creating your own, you know what I mean? Like,
it's funny, we started originally more hoping to be like more lighthearted and fun. Like Trey, who we just interviewed and whose interview is about to play, we were just talking about how like it's fun when people don't take themselves too seriously. And I feel like especially in fintech and investing, there's a lot of like stodgy, stuffy kind of dialogue. And so we want like a more fun presence. Weirdly, we found that a lot of the companies in this space that were actually leaning into more fun presences, whether it's like Party Round or Stonks, other folks too, kind of like changed their tune to being more serious just because it felt like consumers weren't ready for a more kind of like jovial, fun, tone when it came to like a fintech product where, you're investing your dollars and things like that. And so funnily enough, as much as we are consumer, and I personally love kind of leaning into more fun stuff, funnily enough, I think we've been kind of brought back to more like sincerity and less kind of like fun consumer stuff, which I love. No one's going to fault you for going with the safe route. And so if you're going with a company who's a little bit kind of jokey and stuff, if you're, I don't know, working for bosses or teams that maybe are a little conservative, they might not jive with it 100%. But anyway, I think part of the joy of being a founder and building a company is, building things your own way. So anyway, I don't think there's only one right way to do it.
No doubt.
Yeah. So we just interviewed Trey, whose interview is playing next. He is the CEO and co-founder of Tennr. And they basically take a very antiquated process of doctors referring patients to specialty practices that's primarily done via fax today with dozens of pages, and has a very cool product that automates the receipt and therefore processing of them, therefore helping patients see doctors faster, helping those practices earn more revenue by seeing those patients, and just reducing kind of headache and admin for a lot of people. I loved this interview. I think I met Trey years ago and I actually had no idea that he had gone through such an extensive what you call idea maze, Leeor, of just testing out a bunch of different ideas and pivots and almost giving up multiple times. He talks about going to YC like months after he was he already had raised money and was working on it, or working on different ideas with his co-founder, and how kind of YC and the speed of it turned him around, and how he came across the idea behind Tennr. And now they've raised like seed, Series A, Series B, I think in less than a year or something crazy like that. Most recently, like 37 million from Lightspeed and Andreessen and a bunch of other folks. So very cool story. Loved his candor. I think actually one of my favorite interviews that we've done. So
he, look, startups are really, really, really hard. And there are exceptions to this where it seems like the startup was essentially up and to the right from the beginning. But, he was like, he almost gave up like many times, and he kind of described some of those times on the interview as well. And there is an element of like perseverance as well. And so I don't know, it's always like, I think, a good reminder especially for founders who might be listening to this, who are in like the trough, and who like, I think it's inspiring to hear about someone who was in that for a very, very long time, and who kind of got himself out of it and kind of continued to figure things out. But whereas he was about to give up multiple times, and it kind of persevered through. So very inspiring. And without further ado, Trey.
Trey, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I hope my mic is not echoing, and I hope I sound good. But other than that, yeah, it's great.
Oh, you did great.
Right.
The thing is, I'll never know because I don't think I can listen to my own voice. But
that was relatable. Eventually, you get used to it, but I understand that cringe. Wait, so actually, Leeor, Trey and I met years ago via Twitter. This must
where
have been
all the
back
best
in
friends are made.
Truly, though, back in 2022. So I guess not that long ago, 2021 maybe. And actually I was looking back and I was trying to remember, like, how did we even connect? And I will say, Trey, I have a confession that I think part of the reason why I was excited to meet you is because I saw you were an engineer at Strava, and I was working on a fitness company at the time. And so I was secretly hoping that I could hire you, but sadly we met and you were working on your own thing. I was like, damn it, he's off to YC, he's on his path, but I'm excited to hear about what you've been up to since then.
Totally. And by the way, you can still hire me if something goes belly up. So, I think I was probably hedging my bets.
But yeah, it's great to reconnect, and I'm excited to hear about everything since then.
Totally. I mean, I'm trying, because if I met you, before YC, we had this kind of an interesting thing, just like time-wise, the thing that's like hard for sometimes people to grok is we were like we're too smart, we don't need Y Combinator, it's super extractive, things like that. So we didn't do it for like the first 18 months of the company. And so we actually went into it like 20 months in, and we had raised like tiny little checks from angel funds that were just like paying ourselves not very much, not really, I guess, not like a tragically low amount or anything like that, but like we were going to run out of money. So like, oh, well, there's only one way to get $500,000 quick. We should probably do YC. And at that point, things were still not like, we really hadn't, like, we were just building, basically, frankly. We were 3 engineers and we spent all of our days coding. We would have like 2-month product roadmaps, but no customers. It was sort of this like weird irony. I'm sure it's not like the most foreign thing, but when you're an engineer trying to solve, like, even if you're trying to solve the same problem, you're going to make that. We made that mistake like to the max. And so anyways, we basically got to, we lived in my parents' house, and right after I basically met you, actually, Steph, and we moved to YC, and we're like, okay, this is either going to work or we're all folding our bags. After this, there was no like, oh, we're going to do this for 5 more years. If it doesn't work after this, we were pretty spent. We were pretty excited to run out of money if YC didn't work, to be honest. So that I think is, that was sort of the mindset going into YC, was like, all right, this is either going to work or honestly, I am going and probably going to be a software engineer again.
That's incredible. Wait, that's the best endorsement for YC, I think. I feel like Garrett Hansen all over this clip, sending it to all the founders.
Well, it's so funny too, because I'm not like, I love YC. I'm not like the guy that's like, oh, I'll apply to YC, because honestly, I don't think most people get the value that we got out of it. And it's because I think we had that like period where we were so beaten down by reality, and like so much like, wow, we are not actually that smart. This has not come naturally to us. So to go to YC, we were like, we've been so humbled. We were like, listen, just tell us, just tell us, like, not, they don't tell you product decisions. They don't tell you what to build, who to sell to. I always sum it down to like, it is like speed, which is what they teach, and peer pressure, and the psychology of like, I am not going to show up to this meeting in 2 weeks and have nothing to show for it. And ultimately, like, I think that speed kind of has to be there anyways, but like they drilled it so hard into me that, and I was at that point, like finally like humble enough that like still the number of companies that in YC, I was humbled enough. I don't think I got humble, by the way. Sorry, just to be that clarification. But I was humbled enough to know, I'm wrong, right? Like there's no special reason why I can't get this done in 1 week. It's usually just me making excuses for myself. And yet the number of like kind of other companies that still do YC, but don't, I think, like internalize that lesson because they feel like they have to learn it for themselves, I think is why it doesn't always work. It's like a diet pill, but you actually have to like, change your diet too.
Totally.
That's
it's interesting. Yeah, it's super interesting because, it's funny. One of my portfolio company, I think, that has took most advantage of YC also had been building for a year before they went into YC. And of course, there's like many examples of people coming to YC with an idea like that they kind of like thought of over the weekend and like started kind of coding and building on stuff, and then they pivot. And obviously there's plenty of good examples on those fronts too. But it's interesting thinking about it as something that like is helpful after like the initial bit of building. So you kind of understand and are aware of, I guess, the difficulties in building something. It's I haven't really heard that perspective, so it's interesting that's something that you guys
I mean, how many things have you been taught, and then it's like, or life sort of teaches you, and then it's like, then somebody says it and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, clicks now. But when somebody just says it to you, you're kind of like, and I think obviously that's why this podcast makes sense, is like, most of the lessons that are out there are from people that are like 7 years in, so they're talking about experiences that almost nobody has. I'm a big sucker for like a Frank Slootman podcast. I have a whole playlist.
Yeah, me too.
But frankly, like I don't really experience what it's like to run a 7,000 person, 700 person team, right? I'm running a 70 person team, and so it's like it's you have to experience some of these things, I think, before you actually like resonate with people teaching around it.
Yeah, but as a VC, it's important for me to just randomly tell my portfolio companies amp it up. So I mean, I'm with you on
your value.
Well, there's some things that are never wrong. Like just go faster, do more, and like don't. It's like there's no. We have like this stupid. I always have these like stupid things that if I like, didn't cringe myself to death, I might post on like a LinkedIn, which is like we had like a 2-hour rule. Like almost everything should be able to be done. When we were 3 or 2 people, like almost everything can be done in 2 hours if it's important enough, and like maybe 2 days. And if it's 2 weeks, like it better be like fundamentally changing the company. And we refuse to think about anything for longer than 2 weeks in terms of planning like product builds. And that does not work now, it turns out. But like early on, it's like was really, really helpful. Because like I said, we used to have 2-month roadmaps with no customers. And it's like, that's probably directionally incorrect, right?
Wait, I would love to hear about, the idea maze. We talk about that a lot. Like I'm just curious, what are some of the ideas that you guys were exploring even before you got into YC?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we always had the like fundamental belief, it's like very simple, that we just like wanted to automate things that people hated doing, and that actually like, no matter how much, human capital you put at it, a computer or machine could do better. And so we got kind of caught in that maze. And one of the like earliest things was looking at looking at like the design and sort of front end building parts. The classic like dev problem thing is like, I was a software engineer, and so were my 2 co-founders. So I was build for software engineers, and like sort of short story, but actually we like got like an acqui-hire offer for that, and it was this like awesome thing. So we're like 7 months in, and actually if you look at like the numbers of startups, and this was like a long time ago, right? This is like before we even talk, like sort of like BC of when we even talk about like the company forming. So honestly, if any of our customers like hear this and we're talking about sort of our origin story, this is like before the origin story that I wouldn't even share, right, with a customer. So we got this acquisition offer, and I remember this feeling of like this relief, because frankly they were gonna pay our like 6 angel investors back, and we had spent I think like $80,000 on our salaries over like a year or something at that point, and it was this insane relief. And then basically this wasn't really the start of like our idea maze iteration because we'd only spent so much time on this. And then when I realized, oh, like this is the worst case scenario, like I can just go get a cool job at a cool company. It was the most like freeing thing ever. And Diego and I kind of like looked at each other and we were like, what do we really want to do, right? And when we kind of came to that answer, we're like, all right, look, we are going to solve an important problem. We are going to make this work, for as long as it takes. And then I obviously told you that YC story. We were still pretty ready to give up, like two or something years after that. So again, like we have a lot of revisionist history where we try to like, the company started when I went into an imaging center and saw, the problem, that we solve in the medical space firsthand. But before that, right, we were iterating like, madmen. Sorry, it's like, to be honest, one of the things you also do, I think is like, I'm trying to know my audience here because I know this stuff is relevant, but like you block it out of your brain so hard.
Yeah,
like I like literally actually, I spend zero time, like I spend like almost zero time reflecting actually on that like insane iteration phase. The only time I like reflect on it is when like there is an existential crisis at the company and I think about how badly I do not want to go back to that place. And it usually musters up the excitement to do just about anything that's required. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. It's so funny. Something I noticed when I was in VC is how different the media portrays like founding stories versus like the reality of them. Like they're all very messy and very up and down. And I feel like they only come out when someone is wildly successful, which you're very much on your way there. But soon this will be a badge of honor and something that people are excited to kind of dig into. Even if it's, I can relate, personally annoying to dig into again and like re-traumatizing. So I definitely get that.
Retool at one point was like a clothing brand,
Totally.
like they're like these.
I didn't know that.
You never hear about these, like obviously they weren't called Retool, I hope, but and by the way, I don't even know if that's true. Some VC told me it though, but and you never really know. But the key thing is like the confidence and honestly, I think since if there might be any VCs that do listen to this, the thing I missed about that Webflow story was I did call one of those angels. I'm freaking out because I'm like, man, like we're, at that point I thought we were lighting money on fire because we had burned 80K of the, I think 400 or something K we had raised in pre-seed. And I was like, oh God, we're like destroying these friends and families like capital. And this one guy calls me, one of these angels, and he says like, Trey, I would rather like take $1 million out of my, he's like, basically he like made me like realize how little he cared about the like 50 grand investment, that I'd rather take out another like $1 million, put it in front of you, light it on fire and take a piss on it before, you quit at this. And like, when you hear that
Beautiful
from somebody,
pros.
Wow.
Yeah. When you hear that from somebody that you're like, you were just like staying up every night, like freaking out about how you're like losing them money, you start getting used to, oh wait, this is the bet. This is the bet they're making. Like I am here to, not light money on fire, but I'm here to like make bets and I'm here to get really aggressive. And that was like the most freeing thing. I mean, I was probably 21 at the time. This is like before I was, like I said. So that was like the most freeing thing I think you could be told by like an elder, right? That like, it's okay to get really aggressive and lose money while you're trying to figure it out.
And they believed in you too. I feel like that's a bigger compliment than you're giving it credit for also.
Totally. Oh my God. Like one person saying like, you will figure this out. It's just going to take some time. And the cool thing is, and I kind of hesitate to say this part because it's like, it's just my experience. Like, I sort of like, we started the company in San Francisco. I'm sort of in this like batch of like 5 or so friends. And not everybody is doing the like VC hamster wheel game, but like almost everybody's figured something out. Like they've figured something out very, very cool, adjacent to their learnings because those learnings do just compound and like they solve for something. And a lot of it usually is helping people take leaps in their careers if they go back into working for another company. And in a number of cases, it's like really good bootstrap businesses. Some people get so incredible at consumer, at marketing, at advertising. The hard part, I think, there is just like feeling like you're a leech to society, like just not doing anything. That was the hard part for me, at least. I always felt that was weird.
Yeah. Wait, so talk to us about the change. Obviously, it was like a very iterative approach, but you mentioned like YC being a pivotal point for you. And then you mentioned kind of going to a medical center.
The big change was basically like we were going to solve a problem in the real world. And so my mother works in family medicine. And so we're literally driving in a car before YC started with Tyler and Diego. and Tyler's from Wisconsin, like homegrown Wisconsin. And at the time, like, there was so much iteration and talk about like, building things for other technologists. And Tyler was like, why don't we just build things for like real problems in the real world? And so that became sort of like the hunt for real problems in the real world, which is obviously what brought me into looking at my mom talking about this black hole imaging center, where she would send the patients out to this imaging center and they would disappear into a black hole where they wouldn't be contacted for weeks. And so we literally approached this like, for all we knew at the time, technology might not even be involved in this. Mm-hmm. We're just going to go solve that problem because it's obviously like a very, very real problem. Now, this is like a very kind of common slang, like just solve a real problem. I think where we wasted so much time was trying to solve a problem for us instead of trying to like solve a problem. Even then, it wasn't even solving a problem for like the patient. It was like, because I think that would have maybe given us the wrong lens. It was like, just solve like a problem that exists in sort of society. And I think, how you define those problems is like, obviously a little bit of art, but there are a lot of problems in everything. It's like, eggs cost too much. Like that's a problem. Like you should probably like, maybe let's go solve that. And like, maybe you build some stupid, not stupid, obviously it's like, important that we build good ERPs, but maybe you build an ERP for like, egg farmers or something like that. And you realize that, or maybe frankly, you build like a, device that, modulates, the temperature of a hen in a farmhouse or something like this. I don't know, right? The key thing is that you're just like, oh, I'm going to go solve that problem. So when we got into the idea maze, things started iterating way, way faster in the lead up to YC when we got into like the problem maze, and we stopped trying to like honestly solve what I would describe as like trivial problems. And we're trying to now solve these like monstrous problems that like we can chip away at what we call the patient processing problem for the next 10 years. And, hopefully we solve it, but it'll take so much time that we will solve like so many little problems along the way that it'll be like a very exciting mission. And I think people underestimate that like element of problem solving. It's like, if you want to play the VC game, like the problem that you're solving, in my opinion, this is just one hyper biased perspective, like it should be something that's like, okay, this is like a big systemic problem that like, frankly, nobody maybe is going to solve. And then but then you should actually validate that any of the parties care. It turns out the imaging center actually does care to solve this problem because they lose all their money by being slow. And so why are they not faster? Well, it costs a ton of money to be fast. And it's like buying server racks. The people that do that patient processing sit idle. So they can't flex up and flex down as more patient inflow comes. So anyways, my point, I guess, is then you can go super deep into some of these problems. And they exist, they abound, they're everywhere. And yet we like pigeonhole ourselves. And we definitely pigeonholed ourselves into trying to solve for developers, trying to solve for designers, trying to solve for salespeople, trying to solve for all these like very specific people that instead we didn't say like, well, what's a real problem that just exists out there in the world, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for people that are on this path, and you kind of mentioned problem definition as being an important component, but someone who hasn't figured out kind of what to necessarily like really chew on, like if you were giving advice to yourself when you were in the maybe the trough of sorrow in the 20 months before you kind of had figured this out, like what would you tell yourself to kind of help you along that process, or a founder as well?
Well, I have experience with this, not because I'm like I'm preaching anywhere, but I have a lot of contracts, not real contracts, but like, emotional contracts, a lot of incredibly very smart people at this company that kind of joined out of undergrad. And what I always told them was, joining like at a growth stage or early stage to growth stage startup, like you will learn so much that will save you so much pain. And so there's probably 10 of our most junior but like incredibly high potential talent that is like, I'm sure they're going to start great companies in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think getting that exposure is basically like the quick and dirty answer, is the like getting exposure to like all the mistakes that you make, and like all the things that like it really means. And then the second big thing though is that like I share all of my investor updates from the earliest days with those guys and girls, and we're constantly looking at like, what did I, like where did I just go completely wrong? Where did we just spend months doing the wrong things? And like kind of approaching it like that. But my biggest advice to them is that regardless, you're going to think you learn all this stuff, and then you're going to go branch out on your own. And then reality is going to hit you like a steel ton of bricks. Okay, you went to a great school. Nobody gives a shit. Okay, you were super smart. You were super effective at Tennr. Nobody gives a shit. It's like they only want to care about their problem. Oh, and the problem doesn't make the money. Once again, nobody gives a shit. And you're going to have to get like completely re-humbled again, because we've probably gotten lucky in more ways than I can even count. So then from there, and I'm sorry, Leeor, I'm going about this in a roundabout way.
No, it was great.
You're like, all right, if I'm going to become this like professional technologist problem solver, it's like viewing that as like the trade. The trade is not, and this is actually something that when I heard, oh my God, I would forget Ryan's last name, Flexport CEO.
Peterson.
Ryan Peterson, of course. Yeah. Ryan Peterson, when I heard him say this on some random podcast, it was like the mindset for us became tenable. And I have honestly journaled everything for the last 5 years. So you can literally see the shift when it became like, I'm not trying to start a successful company. I am trying to learn the trade of starting a company that could be successful. Or frankly, it could be a small operation that I run, but I just want to learn because I don't know. Yeah. And then suddenly, 3 years spent learning how to build a company that made its first $1 3 years in for us. Well, like that makes complete sense. Like I wasn't that good at computer science until 3 years in of studying. And frankly, as a software engineer, I'm probably still not that good because I didn't work 3 years professionally. So it's kind of some ridiculous like arrogance that you would start jumping into a startup and it would take less than 3 years to be like good at the trade of like iterating through these idea mazes. So in summary, no shortcut. It is a trade that has to be learned probably over years. And so you better buckle up and like realize that you're going to be the loser when you go to the bars and that is trying to learn some weird obscure trade. But if you get good at it, I think it's useful and it's frankly fun as hell on the other side. Yeah. I'm like having so much fun now. So yeah.
That's so cool. Actually, it reminds me of, I think it was like a Naval quote or something where he actually talks about startup building as being an art. I'm curious how that resonates or doesn't resonate with you. I've never heard of it being, positioned as a trade before, which I really love actually. And I think they can go hand in hand, but I always found that framing really interesting.
It's gotta be. I mean, it's gotta be, right? Like there's no like buttons you can press that will just work. There are things you can try, but even like things that we would try to validate ideas super, super quickly, like they don't work after 3 months. And so you have to try another one. So like you can't even take the like the mechanisms of trying and say, I'll be good at that. You have to be good at coming up with the mechanisms for trying and you can learn from those people. But it's like, the like skill within the skill is like, I'm actually really obsessed with like the egg problem, to be honest. It's like if I ever
I had a feeling that wasn't random. That's great. Yeah.
Well, there's some like really interesting like protein research that like is going to be like more industrializable in 5 to 10 years. But if I ever sometimes psychologically cheat on the patient processing problem, it's sometimes with the egg problem. And but my point is that like I know that like the cold email scripts that worked really, really well, the cold call scripts, the event circuit, that's not going to work for that type of problem. It probably wouldn't work. And if I go to the mindset of like, oh, I'm so good at this, I have my playbook, I got my science, and I like apply it there, like I'm going to be totally effed. But fortunately, I've never talked to an early stage founder that has been in these situations and doesn't know what they should be trying. Let's take this like egg problem, because hopefully somebody else does it so I can not be distracted. It's like I bet you go to the grocery store. Right? Like I bet you just the same way that ultimately we learned about this problem by going to the imaging center and like, yes, I pretended to be working at my mom's practice so they would let me in and like show me everything. But like, I bet you go to the grocery store and I bet you pretend like you're a egg dealer or something like, I don't know anything about this, by the way. I'm probably sounding like an idiot, but I bet you do something that's like uncomfortable. And I often talk to like early stage founders and I'm like, how do you validate this? And they're like, I guess I could talk to the grocery store. And I'm like, okay, go talk to the grocery store guy. And then you check back in 3 weeks and they never went and talked to the grocery store guy. Yeah. That's an art. Whereas I was a rower. Rowing is a science. Rowing, like I can tell you train for 1 hour at this heart rate based on, your average heart rate, you will be fast. And I've never seen it not work. It's never not worked. It is a press this button and you get fast. And the only and the hard part of that for me when I was 14 was just figure out, okay, what is the heart rate? How long should I go? And then I had like a 10K world record within 2 years of that because it was so systematic. This is the reason this was such a hard experience for me is that there was no playbook like that. I couldn't run it. And that really sucked. Unfortunately, though, this growth stage is seeming a lot more sciencey than arty is what I'm sort of learning. So I'll stay tuned. But the early stage stuff, very arty.
Wait, so before we go too far, I'm curious, can you summarize what Tennr is? And then you kind of alluded to kind of the early formation of obviously the
Yeah,
problem that you're solving and how you discovered it. But yeah,
So
tell us
super
more.
simple. When my mother sends a patient to an imaging center, so you go to your general practitioner. Let's call that provider, doctor A. Okay. When they want to send you to a specialist, and a specialist can be the place that you go get imaging done, right, to scan your back. It can be the place where you go get like specialty drugs infused. It can be a place where you go to a knee specialist or orthopedic specialist. When they send you over, it's not like, oh, Steph, just go walk down the street and everything will be taken care of. They have to like basically take a packet of information, send it over ahead of time, and then that provider B has to do a bunch of work to actually say, okay, Steph, you're all good to go. It would be like if you wanted to go to a trip to Italy, but you had to like send your luggage first, and the Italian bureaucracy had to spend 2 months reviewing that all of your luggage is kosher and gonna like mean that you can pay for your trip. That's really the same thing that happens in moving from provider A to provider B. There's also provider C, provider D, provider E, and actually most of the mess of what people think of like healthcare is broken is actually all hidden behind provider A. And our software is super, super simple. We help provider B process that paperwork from usually a fax machine, an email, or a portal online so much faster, like 1,500x faster. And yes, we've now, we have this like incredible research team and obviously used the Stanford AI Lab experience and all this stuff to build these incredible models that can actually do this. But like, honestly, the technology and the approach was all like iterated on. Fundamentally, maybe the better solution would have been to just like, build a better staffing org. We would have done that if we thought that was the better solution. But that's the problem that we solve. And it's very, very simple. Provider B pays us. Why do they pay us? Because we can prove to them that we are so much better at getting those patients in. And when you get patients in faster, people send more patients. We are so much better at making sure they get paid for those patients. And then number 3, they can take on more patients without having to add more overhead. And so that's like the quick like service revenue growth and then efficiency generation. And we're hitting on all 3 really well. And so that's why it seems to work really nicely.
That's awesome.
How did you kind of like, especially the beginning days from provider B standpoint, kind of prove to them that your solution was effective? Because like, I mean, now you have like enough proof points, you can kind of reference, various, physicians or whatever. But at the beginning, like, how did you think about that, like kind of cold starters problem?
It's like really hard. It's like honestly really, 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 really hard. I think one of the big things, like, I think so much of the stuff that I may like now try to ascribe to like us being clever was like probably more about factors that we were completely outside of our control, like how bad the pain is, like reimbursement rates getting cut in healthcare. Like there's a reason, like we actually tried to replicate everything that we did with healthcare with logistics, like right out the gates, because we thought, oh, more customers, that'd be great. No, that was really stupid. And there's reasons, there were like basically macro factors for why it worked really nicely with our providers we worked with. But here's literally like what we did. So you go to that imaging center and you say like, listen, ma'am, because actually I'll never forget. Hey, my mom, it's like, my mom is sending you patients. What the hell is going on, guys? This is a big problem. And then they're like, well, look at the crap that we have to deal with from what your mom sends us. She never sends us all the right information. She ordered a lumbar there's no proof that we have done any therapy here, so we're not going to be able to get paid for this. And she's sending 10 documents for one patient, 10 patients on one document. This is a mess. And I'm just from like looking at that, I'm like, first of all, okay, my mom did me kind of dirty here because she didn't tell me about all the crap that she was leading to. And second of all, I'm like, can I solve that for you? And they're like, okay, buddy, like try, like you and everybody else that's tried to solve this. And so we went and we built these like really good models, and we had like the early proof points that like our model is going to be better at extracting this type of data than OpenAI. And we're talking like early GPT-2, GPT-3. So it was like so poorly performing. It was very easy to like beat. And then we show back up. We're like, guys, we solved this problem. Look, it's done. And they're like, and I'm like, where's your IT person? We're going to just connect into the APIs and integrate and it'll be good. And they're like, what IT guy? And we're like, oh, fuck. Okay. And then they're like, and guys, get this. You guys are only 91% accurate. We did a test. We are 97% accurate. And they're like, So you're telling us you're going to programmatically put the bad data in 3% of the time? Like, that's ridiculous. So then we had to build this whole UI around it. Then we had to do this. And we literally just like focused on like, no, we're going to solve your damn problem. And at the time, you know, there was like really no alternative, I think. And frankly, there still isn't, honestly. But like nobody at least had copied our messaging enough to like pose as an alternative. So it was like, yeah, sure, whatever, man. I'm not paying you anything. You go try. The key point of validation, though, that where I had learned my lesson was that when I said we're going to go try, I made them sign something that says, if I solve this problem for you, you're going to pay me X amount of dollars. And so when I had gotten their boss to sign that we were going to pay X dollars, but I had to solve the problem with like clear KPIs, I didn't care about invoicing them. You know, I was happy to burn VC dollars trying to figure it out. But, you know, I had them on record as saying that this problem was worth 36 grand to them at the time, which I thought was like this insane amount of money. You know, sure enough, we found out it was costing them probably millions of dollars a month. But what are you going to do? So basically, like very personal, very like, we're just going to solve your problem. This is the problem we're going to solve. I'm not going to like do everything under the sun. I'm not going to show up and look. And the number of people that like, if somebody came to us right now and said, Trey, I think I know how to solve your on-prem EHR integration problem, and it's something that I promise you haven't thought of before, I'm going to listen to them. And they said, hey, sign this and pay me $100 grand, but only if we actually solve the problem for you. I would sign that thing in 20 seconds. And now this person has a guaranteed first customer. And I've probably done that a few times, honestly. And actually it's worked. So yeah.
Wow, that's super cool. Was it literally just the one customer? Like, did you validate kind of like the TAM or whatever you want to call it, other folks, or were you literally just so laser focused on this one initial relationship and working?
We were kind of just, we kind of, no, I didn't really do any TAM analysis, to be honest. I didn't do any TAM analysis until we decided to go raise money or something. It was kind of like, this feels like a problem. And frankly, like if you go to a Thanksgiving dinner table and you just ask like basic things, like, does everybody feel like they get to the next appointment fast enough? And you're like, okay, I think I know why. It's like, you can draw some math of how it's a $6 trillion problem. You can draw some math how it's a, $3 billion problem in each vertical that we operate in. Frankly, it's like such a clearly big problem, like getting high quality proteins into cheap or like let's call it like malnourished or like lower spend countries. That's like, we could do some math, sure, but like who are we doing it for?
Fair enough. I'm also curious about, like, I can see the clear pain point, and obviously the fact that you guys have succeeded so well in the way that you have proves that. I could imagine at the very beginning when they don't know who you are, your company's unestablished yet, there are no case studies. They're like, we're so busy that I don't even have time to entertain this hypothetical team that may or may not solve this problem. I'm curious, what did you do to kind of get them over that?
Hijacked authority and like making it about, if we go back to the stupid egg example, it's going to make me look like such an idiot because I know nothing about this world. Like, I would go talk to the grocery store, but then I would figure out where do you solve the problem, but then who cares about the problem being solved? And then try to get the person that's not going to be paying for it, but cares about the problem to be solved to endorse you and make the introductions and like be that person. That was like a weirdly useful hack that probably won't work anymore or something, but I would probably try that route again. I would never go directly to the, like if I let's say it's some, device for monitoring egg temperatures for, eggs, whatever, right? I'm probably not actually going to go first to the farmer. I'm probably going to look at like who is adjacent to this that the farmer is disappointing. Maybe it's really a pain point for the distributor that they drop their eggs off when the eggs are at the wrong. Actually, I know eggs don't have a temperature problem. Whatever, it's stupid. But maybe the temperature goes wrong for the distributor, and so the distributor hates how much time they have to spend sifting through these things. They're not going to be the one that pays for the sensor, but I'm going to say, hey, can I get a badge? And then we go back to the farmer and be like, hey, I'm coming from eggdistributionsystems.co, and we are demanding as part of our contract with you guys that we install this software, and I'll show you that it'll be helpful. But first, just let us do it for free. That's like a good way to kind of hijack authority. And now suddenly you're like representing the customer of theirs. I don't know. That's how I would typically think about it.
That's awesome. Very cool. Oh, sorry, Leeor. God.
I was just saying I like the term. I don't know if I've ever heard the term hijacking authority, at least in this context. And it seems to me that it's absolutely like necessary, especially if you're, not someone who's necessarily like you don't necessarily know the customer personally. And so how else can you figure out a way to make them want to engage with you, and kind of making it so that, there is like this kind of, I guess, authority imbalance, or maybe you're rebalancing authority. It makes a ton of sense.
And again, that's where it's like, again, I tell the story and people think like maybe my mom was like owned a practice or something. Like she's a late in life, went to become a physician's assistant, very like super big inspiration to me. And I was just like, cool if I steal the like name, like cool if I steal the badge. And like, frankly, may have been illegal for all I know to come in, but I did sign a BAA with them. And I was like, I'm going to go represent you guys and represent your patients. And this is a big problem for you. You're completely powerless to solve it. I'll go be the asshole. So it literally felt like hijacking authority and taking the name tag. And by the way, I'm sure that imaging center, who by the way, ultimately became a paying customer 2.5 years later. So it took so long to actually get them to pay the money because I had so overpromised like an idiot to start. But if I show up there and I'm like, give me some time, they don't give a crap. But if I'm like, hey, I'm coming as one of your most important people that sends you business, one of the people that you need to make happy, well, you're going to give me some time, I would guess.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. It reminds me of Leeor and I had this classmate, similarly very, scrappy and creative, and she was exploring ideas. You know who I'm talking about? She was looking at, she was really interested in like cross-section of like community and tech, and particularly trying to explore like the Weight Watchers model applied to other communities. And so she would literally go to like AA meetings, grieving
yes, now I do know what you're talking about. This is bonkers.
Different people. And, at the time, everyone's like, this world's crazy, but she, is on her way to being wildly successful. So I think there's something to it. You got to hijack authority. Yeah. I love that. That's a great term.
But by the way, I totally stole this idea. Ultimately, it's a derivative actually of like Tony Zhu. He would like, he would have, there would be customers that would be ordering from restaurants, but the restaurants weren't actually on DoorDash. He was just taking their menus and pretending to represent them. And he would literally walk in with a bucket of cash of how much money they had earned from DoorDash. And that was like, hey, you're going to pay attention to me because I'm already making you money. I already matter to you. Travis Kalanick, when he was recruiting the first like drivers, he was like, it was literally a bucket of cash. It was like, hey, I already am going to pay you. I'm here. I'm a big limo company operator and I want to give you this great job to be this like private. I'm going to overpay you and I'm going to like have some authority. He was not like, please use my app that like connects you with our passengers. It was like, I'm going to give you a job that is so damn good, or I'm going to give you a bucket of cash. So there's all these like, definitely did not come up with the idea of like, giving somebody something people care about, or using authority to make people care about it.
I'm curious, like we kind of talked about, you mentioned how, one big shift for you was like solving quote unquote real problems and shifting away from technologists and solving ultimately, obviously, for healthcare. And my take on it, and obviously, Laura, you invest more in this space than I do, but healthcare is very complicated, obviously. And I think people shy away from it given how kind of intertwined all the providers are and the different stakeholders and the incentive systems. Like it's hard to isolate one problem to solve. And I'm kind of curious, what do you think the future of like AI and healthcare is going to be? What opportunities in the space do you feel like are still being, underestimated or untapped? You mentioned one earlier that you guys face all the time, but curious if there are more.
Totally. Man, I really don't want to get too soapboxy, but like I always get really excited about like ideas that prevent people from like doing things like when crypto was really big and like every VC was trying to convince us to go into crypto. I remember there was this like idea that like, Web 2 is dead. There's no interesting problems to solve. It was kind of like a Unabomber philosophy of like everything interesting has already been solved. And so whenever you hear something like that, it's probably a good opportunity. Like, that means probably a lot of people hear, healthcare is this tangled, impossible mess. It's too hard to sell into. And it's like, okay, well, we should probably try there. Because that means that it's probably scared away a lot of other people. And that actually ends up being the case in healthcare because it actually is really, really hard, it turns out. But then if you take that even further and you say, okay, this problem or healthcare, like US healthcare system is broken, it's kind of like this, this very, it leads to no action, obviously. And so you're like, okay, all right, sure, healthcare is broken. Okay, what parts about it are broken? And then you actually ask all the questions. And, if you define a user's or a patient's interaction with the healthcare system when they're saying, oh man, it's broken. there's 3 moments really that they can think things are broken, right? There's all the stuff that happens before a visit, trying to find the right doctor and ZocDoc solves this problem, trying to get referred in, trying to get seen quickly, right? And we exist in what we call the pre-visit world. And I really do believe that when people say, oh man, healthcare is so broken, it's really about like the pre-visit experience, because that usually includes, oh man, insurance denied me, so now it's taking 4 extra weeks to go get. And these things that people feel like are broken are actually very solvable systems. Then there's in-visit. It's like, man, my doctor doesn't look me in the eye. Healthcare is so broken. And there's like, a bridge is doing really, really interesting things and like clearly actually solving that problem. So that's actually going to be a solved problem. And I think there's some good technology that really like solve a lot of the healthcare is broken problems. There's a lot of really good stuff like what we're doing that's like solving the like healthcare is broken in this like pre-visit stuff. By the way, I don't really say like AI because I think, who cares if the solution involves AI or not? Obviously ours happens to involve a lot of language models. I think AI ends up being this like, frankly, I'll fire a sales rep if they say the words AI, because it's this like catch-all of lazy. It's like intellectual laziness, I think, to say, oh, AI is going to do all the shit. It's like, no, it's not. I can tell you AI is not going to do proper payer selection based on a PO box for, a Blue Shield, Blue Card in California. That's actually all structured like logic that we've had to set up. So that's pre-visit. In visit, we've talked about really good like voice AI, notation, and home health. There's really good like, charting things, physical therapy. And that's going to be like people simultaneously overestimate and underestimate things like voicing, things like automating of communications are going to be like huge for dealing with the unstructured data mess that healthcare has. And then there's post-visit. So post-visit has things like coding issues, denial issues, appeal issues. And those are all like, frankly, like definitely solvable and definitely going to have really important components of models that do better coding, models that understand better appeals. But frankly, there's also going to be better models for denials. So you're going to deal with that. And in each of these buckets, pre-visit, in-visit, post-visit, I hopefully picked a couple. There's, by the way, getting off of waitlist pre-visit in this company I love called Pencil. They're like a 4-person startup, but I just love them because they're so like, they're just doing the things right, like the equivalent would be like, they're just actually rowing like 2 hours extra a day and getting really fit in terms of like this one, their CEO there is just like watching him just like execute all these things to a T. It's so lovely to watch. But anyways, there's a million things within the pre-visit that you would say, oh man, this is broken, all solvable, all just require really good technologists to go in and solve it. One of the big reasons that healthcare feels the most broken is that the government came in and gave a bunch of subsidies to a bunch of to adopting EHRs. So what happens when you get paid by the government to adopt technology? There's this idea that people should only ever adopt new technology or will only adopt new technology when there's a 10x improvement. Digital EHRs were not a 10x improvement to filing cabinets. They were actually usually worse for the people that were interacting with the file cabinets. I can go into a file cabinet and, one of our customers in Arizona, pull up a chart, update it way faster than the 17 clicks that's required within most modern EHRs. But you flood a bunch of government capital into it and say, oh, we got to solve the problem. You have actually a reversion of improvement to the workflow. And so you didn't actually let capitalism run its course there. And so now you have this broken technology where you incentivize bad technology. And frankly, no other like honest, as far as I know, sector of the economy had such a finger on the scale that led to not good technology being adopted. Like, frankly, people should have, this is, I know, ridiculous, but I'm like a fax machine conservationist. People should not have adopted EHRs until they were good enough that they were actually a 10x improvement and they could be, and they were sold on a merit base. And by the way, this is not like why it was fined hundreds of millions of dollars for kickbacks. They were paying doctors to refer into themselves and to adopt their technology. There's all these like bad things that happened that led to like unnatural technology evolution. So sort of a last little bit of like preachiness for you that's interesting that I didn't know about before I started.
That's super cool. I guess my wrapping up the section, I guess, I'm curious, you mentioned kind of like your start, which was a lot more winding. You mentioned more slow, trying to figure it out. Obviously, like you've grown tremendously in the last, would you say, year or so? You raised your A and B very quickly, back to back, for example. What has been like the contrast of that? Like, I'm curious, just from your seat as a founder and growing your team and doubling in size so quickly, what has that journey been like?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, I guess if like early stage founders are like listening to this, they're probably doing the right thing, because like we had a rule where Diego and I would like research deeply two SaaS businesses, like two businesses that looked like ours every single day. And so by the time we had product market fit, one, I think we really knew that we had product market fit, and we waited to have really, really strong product market fit. We didn't like get happy ears about having fake product market fit, which is common. And we just read so much about what it feels that we like held off until we had, and my point is we'd studied so much, I think, and we had dialed in so much about sales, about customer success. We had like studied these things so intently that it felt like when the time came that, guys, we finally have product market fit. I'm on 8 calls a day, closing deals relatively quickly. We have good metrics. We can onboard. Then we were able to hire an incredible sales first IC that became head of sales. And with him, we were able to hire 3 more sales reps, and they were able to be super effective right off the bat. And honestly, we actually just hired a new revenue leader. And I think he's kind of like, oh shit, you guys are actually like, especially relative to the stage we're at, probably like, at least, probably a year ahead in terms of like operational sophistication, because we had like, we were sort of just biding our time. So like by the time our time came, we were like, no, we're going to like run this super, super well. The other thing is that it's like, I don't know if this is like a Slumanism or something I took from like Wiz, but it's like, you kind of want to move really, really fast, obviously, but you don't want to burn money until you know you're right. And then now that I know that we are right, and I know that there's going to be a big winner in the space, and I would like for it to be us, then you apply the venture thinking, then you apply the like growth is this hungry machine, and we will not lose for lack of aggression. And so that's like the stage that we're at now, which is why everything is going to be outwardly incredibly fast, even though ironically, internally, we're trying to just be more thoughtful and smart. So basically, we're ready for it, is what I would say. It's my 2 cents.
That's awesome. Very cool. Awesome. Well, we can wrap up with just a few rapid fire questions. Leeor, do you want to take us away? And these are meant to be just fun, answer whatever comes top of mind, sentence or less type of stuff.
Yeah, awesome. The founder you look up to most?
Brian Peterson, honestly. It's why it's super embarrassing that I totally glitched on his last name. I got to meet him at a YC event, and he's the man, and he's funny, and he like has good humor, which I hate when people take themselves too seriously. He's great.
Wait, is he not the founder of Flexport?
No, he is. Sorry, I was going to say Frank Sluman because he's my favorite. Like, he's my favorite operator CEO.
Okay, that counts too.
Yeah. Book that most changed your life.
Hard Drive, about the early days of Microsoft. When you realize the things that Microsoft did to like the early days, like you can read just the first 200 chapters, and like, Bill Gates would go into like a customer screaming at him on like being over on timelines, and he'd come out with an upsell, and you realize, it's like your job is like just to be able to face that head on, and like, that was like weirdly inspirational to me. But that was big unlock for me. Yeah.
What job would you want if you weren't a founder?
Marketing creative.
Oh, nice.
Have to be a marketing creative, like a 100%.
Cool. Interesting. Wow.
It is now like the most fun part of like my day is like, and I don't even get to do it that much, but like, and I'm not the best at on the team, but it's like, we're doing like a product marketing webinar, and like, I really want that webinar to be beautiful. I want it to like look incredible. I want the messaging around it to be awesome. I want the sales decks to be this like perfect, expose about what we do, how we solve it. I think I could just spend my whole day, instead I just spend like my nights nitpicking everything else that we create, but that would be it.
I'm surprised you didn't fall into the consumer trap, given how much you loved design. That's amazing.
I don't love, by the way, sorry, I want to be clear. Diego is actually the design guy. I don't like love design to some extent degree. I like copy. I like marketing copy. I would like to think I've been like an admin or something like that in a different thing, which is ironic because the first thing our VP marketing, who's great, did was take out all my copy from the website, which is smart. But
you could try. I love it. Favorite account? That can be a newsletter, Twitter account, anything that you follow.
Steph, I think you actually reposted once some account that like basically releases all the gossip of
our
like
for rock
announcements.
Yeah, we're DM friends at this point. So
okay, I love that stuff. It's just so fun to feel like you're kind of like on the inside of some little gossip circle. And then beyond that, I'm like an insanely avid information reader. I think they took pity on me. I was like by far the smallest company to get invited to some dinner they did at the New York Stock Exchange because they know that I'm just like a rabidly obsessed with them. They're so clearly on the inside. They write so thoughtfully. They're absolutely going to write a hit piece about me someday, and I'm so excited to read it because that's a joke, but that's actually a joke. Please don't come after me. I know it'd be Aaron Wu too, who I went to school with and who's incredible. So please don't, Aaron.
I love it. What was your first entrepreneurial endeavor? It could be a company, college initiative, anything.
Oh man, I feel like those are the corny ones where like I tried to make like a sunscreen warmer because my mom would always come up from behind and put on the cold sunscreen in my face every morning, and it would like freeze me to death. And
Is that a cliche?
one? I've
heard
never heard of that in my
before.
life.
That's a pretty unique one.
That's a pretty unique
Wait, what? Okay. Oh wait, wow. All right, my mom was really
These are
great.
just sunscreen warmers. Like people are just trying to do this all the time. I had no idea about it.
Nobody's still done it. You know, like this is how you know the market is inefficient. That nobody's built a good sunscreen warmer. Because if you put sunscreen on your face in the morning and you're a kid and you're eating your goddamn Cheerios and your mom sneaks up from behind and puts on that thing, it's like the worst feeling on planet Earth. And I was determined to solve that problem. And honestly, you know, maybe one day I'll get to return to it. But no, honestly, I wasn't like some like crazy entrepreneurial, like doing cool companies in high school or things like that. I was just obsessed with the things that I was a big improv and rower. That was my life. And student council and things like that. That was all I wanted to do. It was all I did. I felt like I should really just focus on school and rowing and improv, and that was what I did.
Cool. And then we'll wrap it up with the mega trend that you're most excited about. It could be in healthcare or not.
I'm kind of a bear, so I would say like I think agents are like massively overhyped. The whole idea of agents is massively overhyped. I think it should be telling basically that like a couple batches ago you had 1 million agent platforms. Now this batch you have these like fallback APIs to humans for the agent platforms because they all overpromised, and you know, frankly, they're all just having work being done, you know, in the Philippines or something like that. So I think that's going to be one of the most like, I think it's a whatever, fucking put me on record for that. I don't care. I think what's instead like agents that are on like very tight rails, I guess is how somebody might describe our platform, and that's useful. But this like idea that like agents are gonna is ridiculous. You know, beyond that, it is I think like alternative like protein synthesis for different proteins. Like whey obviously is now like it's basically accepted that you can grow whey in a lab, but it's like somehow it's not like the only thing that we're all talking about and worrying about and like working towards is the fact that we can like build the basic blocks of all the nutrition that the world needs. I don't know. That's seemingly most interesting.
Very cool.
And egg prices, obviously. Can't forget that.
Well, that's the same. It's the same thing. And for what's worth is because, like, by the way, I think I don't eat meat, so I probably think about this stuff all the time. Where I'm like, there's got to be better ways of some of these things. And egg prices, like, what does every presidential election come down to? It's like the cost of eggs, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
And if
so
you know
like,
it or not, basically.
Yeah. And it's like there's probably like, you know, do we really all just believe that everything in the world of eggs are being run like perfectly efficiently? Like, do we not think there's another dollar, you know, that we can do with it? Like, it seems ridiculous. So I don't know, these things like bother me. But anyways, guys, such a pleasure. And thank you for the time. Thanks for the questions. I'm sorry I got so preachy on some of these things.
No, this was great. Trey,
this is
thank
great.
you as always. This was awesome.
Thanks everyone for listening. You can find us at somethingnewpod.com. You can follow Steph at Steph Moy, MUI on Twitter. You can follow myself, Leeor, at LMushin on Twitter. Catch us again next time.
Cool. I thought it went well.